Here on Ahlebait TV. I'm Fahima Mohammed, again your host for tonight, and inshallah we'll be discussing another topic with another guest. Firstly, I want to thank all of you for watching and tuning in, and if you do want to participate, you're more than welcome to. The number should be coming up at the bottom of your screen. I want to introduce my guest for tonight. We have with us Dr. Amina Inloes. Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam. Alhamdulillah. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. I'm actually really excited that you're here with us tonight. And we also have our Syed Rizvi. Assalamu alaikum. How are you today?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for hosting.
Very well. It's my pleasure, always a pleasure to be here and having some amazing guests tonight. And today it's no different having you today, Dr. Amina. It's such a pleasure. I really admire your work and all your studies and everything that you've done so far. And I'm really honored to have you tonight. We are going to be discussing a topic which we might have heard before. And I know we've probably discussed it many times, but I think in this day and age, sometimes we forget if it still affects us, and it's about black magic. Does it affect us today? We talk a lot about it in a sense that, you know, it exists, it's in the Quran, but I want to go deeper into the practical ways as to which everyday individuals actually may use this, sometimes even as an excuse, because we do find that if there's a relationship breakdown, if we have issues in our work, challenges with our children, anything that doesn't seem to serve us well, we do seem to think that all of a sudden something like Sahel or something like black magic, bad eyes is done on us, which obviously we're going to go into the discussion. So first question, Dr. Amina, to you is, even if this does exist today and if it does affect us, my question to you is, how much responsibility do we now actually put on that, or also having some accountability on ourselves? For example, I have a lot of clients that do come with relationship issues, and I do feel that yes, some of the excuses does exist to say yes, it's, you know, something's been done, this, that, and the other. How could you tell the difference? And sometimes I even notice, well, actually, even if that is to exist in the actual relationship to put a damper or create some negativity, I do feel that also our individuals, need to somehow take responsibility. What's your thoughts and take on this particular issue when it comes to that, on black magic being done on us today, as well as taking responsibility? Where is the line?
Well, of course, these things happen. They've happened in every culture and for the vast majority of human history. And it's, maybe a bit naive to assume they don't happen because we live in a more secular, or some people think people don't do these things in places like England or the US, which is ridiculous. They do happen everywhere, maybe with a little bit more frequency in some places than others. So it is there, but I do agree with what you say that it isn't healthy to necessarily offload every problem one is having onto sihr, especially because, as you say, sometimes it can be an excuse for not wanting to actually face one's circumstances. Like you said, if someone breaks up with someone they love, it can be easier to say it's for that reason, but that may not necessarily be the underlying issue, and it's good to look at what else might have been going on, or the other person's side. We do hear all sorts of things. For example, I've heard it, for example, they're upset about their children's sexual orientation, and this is the first thing they go to. But as for whether or not it's an issue, I mean, if someone wishes to actually go down this path and consider whether or not it's an issue, part of that is being responsible, being paranoid, and there tends to be a lot of fear around these things, and rightfully so, but that doesn't help anyone any more than being afraid of COVID helps you, or afraid of the rent bill coming helps you. And so it's good to be a bit rational and try to actually break down why someone thinks this might be an issue. I mean, are they having like a haunted house? Is there something tangible that they can point to and say this is off, or something else? Speak with someone who has a good grasp of these things and who's trustworthy and can give a bit more of an objective perspective, and that can sometimes help to sort things out. And I don't think anyone really loses anything as long as they're not being, obsessive, compulsive, paranoid. Just through some of the simple things like extra Quranic recitation and so forth, that might help a little bit to, help a bit in these circumstances.
Thank you so much. That really does highlight quite a lot. Same question to you, Syed, because How do we know even as to how much is placed on black magic if there's a suspicion on that? Say, for example, if some sort of adversity has fallen upon an individual, especially if it's like, quite sudden or something unexpected, life hasn't gone as planned or things like that. How do we know it is seher, and how do we know that some of it is our responsibility?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us as a combination of physical and metaphysical being. And just as our physical side could be harmed, our metaphysical side could also be harmed. And just as there are physical beings, there are metaphysical beings as well who could be used to harm us, or they have also believers and non-believers, and they could harm us the way a physical being could harm us. But the the major the main instruction that we have from Ahlebait and the prophets is that we should have trust and faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But by saying that, we cannot say that we are totally immune from that. If prophets and if imams could be targeted by that, who are we to claim that we will and we cannot be targeted by such evil forces or evil methods that human beings or other creations could use against us. The basic instruction is that always keep on trying to be connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and place your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are instructions that if such kind of thoughts or such kind of fear comes into your mind, immediately recite La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-ali al-azim. And reciting that with understanding its meaning, that there is no force above Allah's force, is a kind of psychological backing to us that
Yes.
we have a greater power who is behind us, and if we trust in the greater power, and nobody can defeat us when the greater power is protecting us. And we have to make this a constant habit of reminding ourselves, and that is why in the Muslim society children are taught from right at the beginning and early stages to use mashallah, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, shukran lillah, inshallah, to keep us connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But unfortunately, what happens that especially in the Arabic society or in a Muslim society where these words have become just a kind of common words without understanding its meaning, it doesn't have an effect. For example, if you go to some Muslim countries, you want to buy something, one of the qasams, I mean the swears that has kafara on it is wallahi billahi tallah. But when you go to buy something in the shop, the person who's selling, he would lie and say, wallahi, this is the right price. Wallahi, billah. And actually, he is doing something which has to be compensated by kafara, and it is sin. It is wrong to do qasam with Allah, wallah, billah, and tallah. So we need we need to educate our society. We need to educate our especially youngsters not to use these words just as a habit, and try to understand the meaning of trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Very, very interesting points. I love what you said about us having the power over the psychology of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having more power, but obviously it depends on our connection with our creator. Secondly, you mentioned about how much we also now use some powerful words and make it very meaningless because we don't actually have the intent of saying it with the correct intention. It's so true. Just like how when you say, is someone going to arrive on time? Yes, inshallah, meaning that's never going to happen. And unfortunately, when we say these words now, it actually gives a negative sort of like impact instead of you actually believing and trusting in those actual powerful words. So true. Now, Dr. Amina, when it comes to us protecting ourselves, as Syed has obviously mentioned a couple of things. There's obviously more that we're going to go into a bit later on with regards to Quran and recitation. But do you think even before protecting ourselves with the Quran and reading certain things and ayahs and surahs, when it comes to even, for example, promoting oneself, is that something that we should or shouldn't do? Because I mean, a lot of the times, people have said, don't post a picture of your children who is gorgeous. Don't say anything that is, which is, good if you want to celebrate that you've actually passed an exam. And then everyone's like, no, because bad eyes is going to come on you. I mean, even if it's not the full seher, is bad eyes just as bad? And should we just never say and speak? Or can we actually do it with good intentions, with protection, knowing that it's not going to happen? Where do we draw the line? What's your thoughts on that, Dr. Amina?
Yeah, and actually, since you bring it up, I think perhaps the evil eye, in terms of metaphysical forces or whatever you want to call it, is a bit more common than someone actually doing sihr. Most people don't really know how to do that, or they're just, it's like if I want to go play football or something, I might do something, but I'm not going to do very much. But the evil eye is according to what is understood, it's sort of like a subconscious capacity that maybe some people have more than others that affects the metaphysical being, whether it really relates to the eye or not. And it is, attributed to definitely in hadith, and the Quran is understood to speak of it too. So therefore, it must be something that is serious, to the point where it's said that even some people in the graves, said in hadith, are said to have passed because of having this directed at them. So it's there, and I think it's good to keep a balance. On the one hand, sometimes there is, as you say, a sort of cultural push to avoid sharing good news because people don't want a sort of backlash or even a sort of social envy too, not only the metaphysical side. Mm-hmm. And to keep everything too quiet is not necessarily good, because the hadiths do say that Allah likes it when the servant of Allah shows the blessings of Allah. So that I should wear clothing which is appropriate and nice, according to my status, and it's good to have a nice house, and it's good to have certain things. And this also encourages other people in society to try to aspire for these things, especially if we can somehow share with people and they can share the blessings with us. I think that can become problematic ethically, let alone metaphysically. If someone is just showing off or lording over other people, like, look at me, I have this, you don't. We've seen this, all the time these days in the celebrity culture and the Kardashians and whatnot. And that, that can bring about a bad feeling in people when they feel like this person has, and we can never have this, and they're taking it somehow from us. And there's no need for that. There's no need to make people feel that way. As for family and children, I mean, I do like to see people's family and children. I do think there might be a certain wisdom in keeping not using children as part of one's public persona, for a lot of reasons, that this being one of them. You really don't know what's in a lot of people, and some people are, quite jealous or envious. You don't know, they might be after your husband or something, and they might be very hateful and vindictive. And I don't think it's always beneficial. While at the same time, I do understand that some people like to do this. It's just the sort of thing I would personally not do extensively, but everyone is different. And as for yourself, you have responsibility for yourself.
Absolutely. No, I love what you said. It is a balance, and obviously the intention's there, but you have to be aware as to what is out there, which is not the same intention as yourself. So there can be that social envy, as you mentioned, and it can affect us. So the whole point is that, discussing if black magic does affect us today, it most certainly does. And there are definitely steps that we can take to protect ourselves, whether it's, just on a social level as well as, Quranic level. When it comes to us really protecting ourselves daily, Sayed, what would be the things that you would say an individual could actually do on a daily basis, which can protect them, which is not long-winded, which is something that we all can remember? And it's nothing's ever 100%, obviously, because obviously it depends on what is written for us and how our intentions are, what is meant for us. It's also sometimes when some sort of like adversity does come upon us. It's not to say that this life is not about that. It's obviously to help us grow and develop. But at the same time, we don't want sort of like affliction towards us. So how could we avoid it? Not just for black magic, but, just for like, to keep us safe, to keep us secure, generally, our family, our friends. What would be the general things that we could pray, read, do that could help us, Sayed?
Yeah, I mean, the first and most important thing is that we need to educate ourselves and our children and increase their awareness about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then once they are mentally prepared and they're ready to believe in the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there are secondary issues like uh, putting reminders in the house, like putting Bismillah or stickers or plates, or maybe wearing rings with the du'as or necklaces with du'as, or maybe even uh, things that are quite common between people. In olden days, people were more illiterate and they were not able to read. So the most common way of giving them confidence was to make ruqya or write the dua on a piece of paper and wrap it on a piece of plastic or something that protected the dua and give it to the person. If you keep this with you, inshallah, you will be protected. And that person believed his iman or her iman was strong. And because they believe that what they are hanging or carrying with themselves or in their house will protect them. Nowadays, that people are more educated. I personally, when people come to me, I advise them to read du'as and try to increase their knowledge and iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that nothing is above Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also, I tell them to, as a reminder, please put these du'as in the rooms. For example, a person came, he said, when I go to my bedroom, I always get scared. I said, okay, when you go to your bedroom, put some stickers and reminders which reminds you of the strength of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or maybe listen to Quran before you go to sleep. Nowadays, mobile phones are available even in your bed, so you can use them positively by listening to Quran and verses and some ayah. If you are able to read and memorize and recite yourself, then you don't need all these gadgets. You can read it and recite it better, and the sawab and benefit of reading with belief and understanding is far better than anything else. If you are in
Absolutely.
the car, you carry Quran or you carry du'as and all these stickers to remind yourself. These are the things that we could do.
That's brilliant. I mean, it's good to clarify that because we do have a lot of people that may or may not understand that that is actually acceptable or not. And I'm glad that you've cleared that up, Sayed. Um, Going a little bit further, when you're going to maybe, like you said, like the Sayed mentioned, we may not have that ability of doing it for ourselves. Dr. Amina, when it comes to spiritual healers, there can be a lot out there, a lot of them, taking money for it, doing dua, doing whatever. And how do we know if these spiritual healers are actually for us? Or, I mean, I know it's quite an open-ended question, but I mean, are there any sort of things that we need to look out for if we are going to be going to these kinds of people? And what do we actually ask, and how do we tell if whether or not it's the right sort of place that we need to go? Because a lot of the times it's like a double sort of like effect, where you feel that it's the black magic, and on top of that you're going to get taken by this person who is actually looking for somebody who is vulnerable as well. So what sort of guidance would you give on that?
I agree. There is a lot of that going on these days. Of course, it's gone on in many places, but especially in London, there's a mixed bag, as you put it. I mean, I've definitely met spiritual healers who I feel are sincere and competent, and then you meet others. Anyway, I would say personally, one thing is go with your gut. If something doesn't sound right, you don't have to do it. You don't have to continue with it. You can just draw the line and say, I need to think about this, and maybe talk to someone about it. Professionalism, I think, is very important, and part of that is maintaining a professional distance. We have the concept nowadays that in professions where there's a potential for an abuse due to a power dynamic, such as, for example, a teacher and a student, or a priest and a person in the congregation, or a psychologist and that sort of thing, that it's the responsibility of the professional as part of their practice to keep a sort of distance, so that there is not a dependency relationship that's fostered, and certainly not a dependency relationship which keeps money flowing into their pocket, but also no relationship outside of what's going on. So, so someone might inquire about your personal life because it's part of what they're discussing. They might give a lifestyle suggestion, or tell you to pray, for example, as Syed Razawi is saying. And these are all good and professional things. But if it becomes, well, I've never met anyone like you, and you're so spiritually gifted, and marriage proposal, and etc., that's definitely blurring the lines, and it's not going to help anyone, and it's unprofessional. So someone who is professional and will draw the line, I think that's a very good sign, that at least they have some sense of what they're doing, that they can be upfront with you and say what they think they can do, what they think they can't do. If someone says they can do everything, and I can tell you who did sihr on you, and, we're going to get rid of all the jinns like this. I mean, take that with a grain of salt. We're not talking about walking gods. You're talking about people who might have some facility in assisting with these things. Word of mouth, I think, can be helpful too. So there's a lot of things. I do agree it's a difficult area to regulate, but those should be a good start, inshallah.
Yeah, no, that's very clear actually, and it's very good that we have these discussions, because as long as we talk about the surahs that can protect us and certain things that we can have, but we're not talking about the everyday issues that people actually face, the people that they go to, the people that can be sort of like manipulating these sort of like challenges that people face in the name of Islam, in the name of faith. So we need to call it out, and that's what I want to do, and we need to be aware of it, because this is a grey area. There's lots to discuss about this. Obviously, we know that the history of black magic existing today, it still continues, unfortunately. The evil eye is one thing. Dr. Amina, when it comes to some of these amulets that people may use, do you think that's a cultural thing, or do you think that sometimes it is actual protection? I don't really understand when it comes to like the eye, for example, if people put it on there as, obviously having a dua, or, doing certain rituals which are acceptable. Is that also something that is acceptable as protection for you? What is your take on that?
Well, there are some texts in Quran and Hadith that are prescribed, from the Quran and in Hadith, that are prescribed for this sort of thing. I mean, God knows best, of course, whether it's correctly related, but certainly the idea is there. And I believe that the written word, especially the word of Allah, is powerful, and to have it, especially with the right intention and maybe given a little bit of extra attention when preparing it, might inshallah assist in these things. I think the important thing is, again, to avoid dependency, and not to think that any physical object is your protection in any situation in life, whether this or not. The first cause is Allah. and the second cause is the material cause. And it's the same whether it's a bulletproof vest or an amulet or something else. And to ascribe full agency to the object would be a form of shirk. But to say that maybe this has a metaphysical function and Allah has permitted this, then inshallah it should work. And these things have been around in, again, virtually every culture for a very long time, and I'm inclined to think that if something has persisted over literally thousands and thousands of years, whether or not it's in Quran and Hadith, it probably has some basis to it. But of course, it's very difficult to pinpoint exactly what things might actually have some spiritual virtue and what wouldn't, especially because a lot of times these days, these things are just factory made and they're sold on the cheap. And yeah, if it has like Ayatul Kursi, again, maybe inshallah, it might have some blessings, but I don't think that necessarily is, that becomes a sort of commercialism of spirituality, which I don't think is necessarily helpful. But yeah, I mean, I personally would ascribe benefit to some of these things, depending on what they are and how they're prepared and so forth.
Yes, no, I love that. It's very clear, actually. I think we do need to also clarify this as well. And I think the one thing that you really touched on, which is really important, is about the dependency and thinking that something of an object, it has got the power. It's literally like a meaning behind it. And again, ascribing to knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ultimately has that sort of like power over it, not a thing or a person, which is really important. And I want to say that and reiterate it and echo it, because I think a lot of us can get carried away with these kinds of issues when we are faced with this kind of adversity. Syed, now I want to go on to something that's slightly different before we end. We've got another 10 minutes, but I think it's really important because we're talking about all of this, but I think we need to take it serious as to people that do sort of like try to harm another. We know obviously it's wrong, but when you go into the extent of doing black magic, if you actually want to destroy another human's life with regards to their business, their relationship, their health, their children's education, whatever, there's so much that happens. And that things happen, especially a lot of it is jealousy, envy, them not having the same in their life, so that they want to see that other person fall for whatever reason it is, and they go to the extent to do this. What is their demise? What is looking out for them when if they don't stop, or if they continue to destroy another person's life? What is in the works for them? I want you to be very, very literal about this, because in order to sometimes stop this from happening, and also to make them aware this is not a small thing that happens, I want you to highlight what is the effect of somebody who actually does black magic on another.
There is no doubt that these things could harm, and if there is a narration and actually verse of Holy Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيَكَادُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لِيُزْلِقُونَكَ بِأَبْصَارِهِمْ لَمَّا سَمِعُوا الذِّكْرَ وَيَقُولُونَ إِنَّهُ لَمَجْنُونٌ وَمَا هُوَ إِلَّا ذِكْرٌ لِلْعَالَمِينَ. This verse is commonly recited for the protection from evil eye. And that was recited for the protection of Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain. And it comes in, and it's not a hadith, it's verse of Holy Quran. And in the similar way, there are other verses and incidents and narrations which point that even imams or prophets were targeted for this. According to a narration, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not die a natural death. He was harmed and hurt by an evil person through poisoning and some other sources. So that's how he died, with a gradual poison, and that's why we call him as Shaheed as well. So definitely these things are there, but we have to, as prophets and imams did, we have to keep our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I would like to also add a point here, as Sister Amina Inloes was mentioning, especially the healers and the person who comes to them for healing should have limits and boundaries. Just like when you go to a counselor, when you go to a teacher, when you go to a scholar, the limits and boundaries should be respected. So a proper healer is someone who would respect those boundaries and would not trespass those boundaries himself. And if he notices that the person who has come to him or her is getting attached, they should uh, do something to detach the person, because as you may also know that one of the most common problem with people like this who are dealing with community and people is that those people who follow them develop attachment disorder, and that could cause uh, problem and trouble in the families and the life of that person and their own life as well. So we have to be very careful and follow strict rulings on this issue.
That is so true. We can have attachment to these spiritual healers and tend to go to them more and further than even our own practices that we should have, directly to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I've heard of that many times. And for every little problem or every little issue that happens, it's like as if, you're calling, the guidance, which it shouldn't be like that, because if for any other professional, it wouldn't be like that. So it should be looked upon in the same way. And that's where there is a danger there of crossing those boundaries, so that you should know that. We do actually have
Sorry,
only a few
sorry,
minutes left.
sorry,
No.
sorry to add. Apparently, in America, uh, this has become very commercialized, especially in psychology. People cannot live their life without shrinks. They become too much attached to the shrinks that they cannot live their life without their advice. So, same thing happens with the scholars and spiritual healers and others. Sorry.
Yes, it's definitely good for business, unfortunately. No, thank you. That's really important that you've added that, because, there is this attachment that humans can have, thinking that they've gone for one sort of assistance, and then, if it works, or if there's, a slight sort of alleviation, then it's a continuous thing. And then they tend to go towards that direction more than even continuing further in their salah, in their, Quran, or sort of other rituals and readings that, can be done for yourself. And I think it's really, really important. We do have another few more minutes left before the end. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us and having such an interesting conversation. And like I said, we can go into the history, we can go into other things, but I think I want to talk about it, like we said, about what people are actually experiencing. And, this is what we need to sort of give sort of a light in with regards to what's happening in our community, and how people need to address it, how people need to not get carried away with it. And if they are faced with this sort of challenge, then they're actually going to be treated and not mistreated, and hopefully have that kind of awareness. What would be your last takeaway, Dr. Amina, when it comes to this? Because it is a very serious issue. It has, caused tremendous, discourse in people's lives as well. So what would be your final words for this sort of topic and a takeaway before we end, please?
I think it is good, as I was saying before, to try to strip away as much fear as possible and just to deal with things rationally. I know that sounds a bit strange in this day and age, because it's, not a rational, and for a person who's, mentally stable and they're not having some other issue, most people can self-monitor. And also, not every issue is like an emergency room sort of situation. Even if there is something weird metaphysically going on, it might be like a cold. People get a cold or a simple virus, not like COVID, and they've got an immune system and they get over it. And part of the immune system, as Syed Raza was saying, it's, your connection to Allah and your salat and so forth. And then sometimes you got something really serious. That's actually, maybe someone somewhere actually knows what they're doing, or they paid someone and they're determined to destroy your life and people's lives. And they're willing to put the time and energy and effort into it, which is honestly, it's less common. But, if someone's actually getting that issue, I don't think it's wise to ignore it either, and to try to look into it, which may involve the services of someone who is able to handle these things and responsible. But again, not getting into some of these other blurry areas like dependency or incompetency is another problem. Some people are sincere, but they're just not competent and they end up making your problem worse. So, to try to look at it and just deal with it the same way we're dealing with any other kind of life problem. And inshallah, we won't have to deal with it. But then again, as with everything else, we don't benefit from denying that there's a problem if there is a problem. And it's good to try to do what we can to fix it up, inshallah.
Thank you so much. That's really true. And like you said, you've highlighted some amazing points, especially, trying to approach it in the best way possible and obviously seek the guidance and sort of like opinions of people around you that are trustworthy. And inshallah as well, we can continue further by having to protect ourselves. Syed, a minute before we end. So I'd like to end with your last takeaway, please.
We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that may Allah protect us from all evil sources and forces, and may Allah increase our iman and faith in Him, and inshallah with this dua and belief we will be protected.
Ameen. Inshallah. Thank you so much. That's an amazing ending. Thank you, Dr. Amina, for your time, for your amazing insights and awareness. And inshallah, we do collaborate again, and I hope to not see you, for a very long stretch of time. And hopefully as well, thank you so much, Syed,